What if one quiet act of kindness outside a roadside cafe changed 8 lives forever? He didn't mean to become a hero. She never asked to be rescued. But that snowy afternoon, a single dad, a soldier, and her 6 children crossed paths, and nothing would ever be the same. If stories of love, resilience, and second chances speak to your heart, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a moment that might just restore your faith in the goodness of people. Now, let me tell you what really happened that day. The wind bit like glass. Jack Harlow tightened the collar of his coat as he stepped out of the hardware store, the old wooden door creaking behind him. Snow had begun to fall in thick, lazy flakes covering Main Street like a hush over grief. Most businesses were closing early. The cafe across the road had already dimmed its lights. He was about to cross toward his truck when something caught his eye. 6 girls sitting perfectly still on the bench outside the cafe. They weren't dressed for the cold. Blue shirts too thin for December clung to their small frames. Their knees were pulled up to their chests, arms wrapped tightly, faces hidden in the shadows of matted hair and fatigue, like statues of silence and sorrow. Jack's breath caught. Behind them, barely visible in the snow, sat a woman in worn military fatigues. Her posture was upright, stiff, but her head hung low. Snow had started to gather on her shoulders in the creases of her uniform. One hand rested protectively across the back of the smallest child. The other clutched a thin manila folder. Jack stepped forward instinctively. One step, then another. She didn't look up until he was within a few feet. Her eyes met his steel blue, fierce but fraying at the edges. Exhaustion lived in her face, but pride held it up like scaffolding. Her lips were cracked. Her hands trembled. "I'm not asking for charity," she said, before he could open his mouth. "We just needed somewhere to sit. We'll leave in a minute." Jack didn't reply right away. He looked at the children again. One had her eyes closed, lips tinged slightly blue. Another was rocking back and forth, so faintly, it was almost unnoticeable almost. He crouched in front of the woman slowly so as not to startle the children. He met her eyes again and said quietly, "Ma'am, if no one's offered, then I am. Please, come with me." The woman blinked as if the words didn't register. "I said, I'm not offering a handout," Jack said, voice steady. "I'm offering warmth. I have a home, a spare room, and a heater that works most nights. That's more than this bench can say." One of the girls sneezed. Another whimpered softly. The woman glanced down at her children, then back at Jack. Her jaw clenched. She looked like a soldier torn between retreat and surrender. "I don't know your name," she said, voice thin. "Jack," he replied, "and I'm guessing you're a mom doing the best she can. That's enough for me." There was a long pause. Then she nodded once sharp and military and began to stand. The children stirred. She helped them up one by one, brushing snow from their hair, murmuring their names like a roll call of hope: Ava, Ruthie, Belle, Clara, Grace, and June. Jack led them across the street, his boots crunching through snow that seemed suddenly heavier with purpose. His truck wasn't big, but he made it work, piling blankets from the back seat, warming hands with the vents cranked on high. On the drive home, no one spoke for several minutes. The heater hissed. Jack glanced in the rearview mirror, 6 sets of eyes staring out the window, like they'd just crossed into another country. "Where are we going?" the woman asked quietly. "Home," Jack replied. "Mine for now. Yours if you want it to be." Her eyes stayed on the road. "You don't know anything about me. You were willing to freeze rather than ask for help. That tells me a lot." She turned to look at him. "What does it tell you?" "That you're strong," Jack said, pausing, "and tired of having to be." They arrived at a small, weathered farmhouse at the edge of town. The porch creaked under the snow, the warm yellow light inside spilling out like a promise. Jack opened the door wide. The girls filed in, eyes darting nervously, as if touching something might make it disappear. Jack showed them the guest room first, then the den, then the kitchen, where soup was already warming in the slow cooker. The woman stood in the doorway, eyes lingering on a photograph on the mantel. Jack, a young woman, and a little girl, all mid-laugh. My wife Jack said gently, noticing her gaze. Gone 3 winters now. Heart attack. Just me and Maya since. She must have laughed a lot, the woman said. Jack smiled faintly. She believed laughter was resistance. The woman turned away, setting the manila folder on the counter. My name's Naomi, she said quietly. I served 11 years. Last station was Kuwait. Before that, Syria. Afghanistan. I didn't expect to come back like this. You came back, Jack said. That's more than some do. Naomi's eyes shimmered but didn't fall. My husband died in a fire 2 years ago. I was deployed. He was with the girls. Jack nodded slowly. Then we both know something about helplessness. A beat of silence passed between them. Then Naomi whispered, "Why are you doing this, Jack?" He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her, not with pity, but with something steadier. Because the world doesn't change in big speeches or marches, he said. It changes when someone looks at someone else and says, "You don't have to do this alone." Naomi swallowed hard. I don't know how to accept that. Jack looked at the girls now curled under quilts on the living room couch, faces softening into sleep. You don't have to know. Just stay tonight. Rest. We'll figure out the rest when the snow melts. Naomi stood still for a long time, then finally nodded. She unzipped her boots, slowly placed them neatly by the door. And for the first time in a very long time, Naomi Carter stepped into a home. Not as a soldier, not as a mother grasping for survival, but as a woman, given the chance to stop running. The silence of early morning was broken only by the creak of old floorboards and the low hum of the heater working overtime. Jack stood in the hallway, barefoot, staring at the guest room door. Behind it, 7 people slept, 1 adult and 6 children on makeshift bedding that had turned his once-forgotten storage space into something that resembled a pop-up orphanage. He hadn't planned on this. No one would. But somehow, nothing about it felt wrong. He padded quietly to the kitchen. The coffee maker sputtered to life. He leaned on the counter, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His back ached from hauling mattresses the night before. He hadn't slept much, not because of noise, but because of what he'd seen. The children had eaten in silence, no whining, no mess, no second helpings, unless prompted. Like they were afraid the food might vanish. Naomi barely spoke. She'd sat at the edge of the table, her posture military straight, one eye always on the girls. Jack took a sip of coffee and stared at the back door. The snow had stopped, but the cold remained. A quiet, persistent cold. He was about to return to the hallway when a soft voice behind him startled him. "Morning." He turned. Naomi stood there in a borrowed flannel shirt and sweatpants that Maya had outgrown. Her hair was pulled back tightly, but strands had fallen loose around her face. Her eyes were clearer than last night, but no less guarded. "You sleep at all?" Jack asked. "Some," she said. "Girls, too. First time we've been inside for more than one night in a while." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've been out there? For how long?" "Since September," Naomi said, walking slowly toward the kitchen table. "Got back stateside in late August. The housing voucher got messed up. Paperwork delayed. Then I ran out of favors and couches." Jack sat down across from her. "That's 3 months, Naomi." "I've done worse," she said flatly, then softened, but not with them. A moment of silence passed. Then she added, "The oldest Ava, she turns 12 next week. She hasn't asked for a birthday." Jack looked down at his mug. "She will. Kids remember how to ask." If you remind them it's safe. Naomi gave him a tired smile, the kind that looked like it hadn't been used in years. That sounds like something your wife would have said. He glanced at the photo on the mantel again. Probably. She taught preschool, believed in snaps and second chances. The hallway creaked again. Maya appeared, her small frame wrapped in an oversized robe, her hair still in sleep-tousled waves. She blinked at Naomi, then at her father. Naomi stood immediately. I'll get the girls up. We'll be out of your way soon. Jack stood too. No need to rush. You're not in the way. He looked at Maya. Honey, you okay? Maya nodded slowly, then said something no one expected. Do they like pancakes? Naomi blinked. I think so. Maya disappeared into the pantry without another word. Jack chuckled. Looks like you're staying for breakfast. An hour later, the house smelled like butter syrup and something close to peace. 6 girls sat around the kitchen table, each with a plate and wide eyes, as if they still didn't trust the food wouldn't be taken away. Naomi moved among them, checking serving quietly, making sure everyone ate. Jack watched from the living room, sipping his 3rd cup of coffee. Maya sat across from Ava, whispering something. Ava smiled, a real one. Jack felt a warmth bloom in his chest. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something like hope. Naomi joined him on the couch, balancing her own coffee carefully. She didn't speak for a long while. Then, without looking at him, she said, You should know. There's an open case file on me, from before I left for deployment. Jack turned toward her. Nothing criminal, she added quickly. Just, when my husband died, there were questions. About supervision, about the house fire. I wasn't there. They said I should have been. So, Child Services opened a case. It's still active. Jack didn't flinch. You're telling me this because you let me in your home, she said. Because you let your daughter sleep under the same roof. And you deserve to know the truth. Jack leaned back. You think the truth makes you less worthy of help? Naomi shrugged. It usually does. He looked at her steady. Let me tell you something. I once failed to pull a 7-year-old boy from a fire in time. His room collapsed before I could reach him. I still remember the scream. I still hear it some nights. But no one filed a case on me. No one questioned whether I was worthy of a second chance. Naomi said nothing, but her eyes glassed over. I see a mother trying her damned hardest, he said gently. I see 6 kids who aren't afraid of you. They cling to you. That tells me more than any file ever could. Naomi turned to face him. You're kind, Jack. Too kind. I'm not doing this out of kindness, he said. I'm doing this because the world doesn't offer enough second chances, and I'm tired of watching good people fall through the cracks. She inhaled sharply, then whispered, We don't have anywhere else to go. Jack stood and walked over to the hallway. He pointed down it. There's a spare bedroom. It's small, and it still smells like mothballs, but it's yours. I cleared out space last night. The girls can stay in the den. Maya wants to help set up the beds. Naomi stared at him. Why are you doing this? Jack answered without hesitation. Because this house has 7 rooms, and right now, it finally needs all of them. That night, the girls fell asleep under real blankets, not layers of jackets. Maya read bedtime stories. Naomi folded clothes in silence, staring at the photo on the mantel again. Jack passed by, pausing only to say, You're not just resting here, Naomi. You're home, at least for as long as you need. She didn't answer, but when she slipped off her boots and placed them neatly by the door, just like the night before, there was something different in her hands, no longer trembling, just steady and willing. The first time Naomi left her boots at the door, it was out of exhaustion. The second time, it was a choice. She stood in the narrow hallway, staring down at the weathered pair, Scuffed, dusty, the left one stitched near the heel from a desert march long past. For years, those boots had been the only thing she trusted beneath her feet. Solid, predictable, not like people. Now they sat there, quietly beside Jack's well-worn work boots and Maya's pink sneakers. Naomi exhaled and stepped barefoot onto the hardwood floor. The house was slowly shifting from temporary shelter to something else, something dangerous, something sacred. A home. Naomi caught herself noticing the details, the chipped paint on the banister, the way the kitchen window let in golden light just before noon, the sound of Maya humming softly while folding laundry. These things didn't belong to her, and yet they were starting to hold her. It scared her more than a war zone. Jack had spent the past few days rearranging rooms. The spare bedroom now had bunk beds, handmade by him years ago, still sturdy, though the paint was faded. The den had become a playroom of sorts, with blankets and puzzles, and Maya's old board games that the girls pored over like they were rare treasures. Naomi tried to stay out of the way. She cooked when she could, cleaned, kept the girls in line. She refused to be a burden. But Jack didn't seem to mind her presence or their chaos. One morning, Naomi walked into the kitchen to find Jack standing at the counter, holding a YouTube tutorial open on his phone. He had a hairbrush in one hand and a rubber band in the other. Belle, one of the middle girls, sat on a stool, giggling as he clumsily attempted a ponytail. Naomi froze. Jack looked up sheepishly. She asked if I could do the twist braid thing like you do. I figured. How hard could it be? Belle looked over her shoulder. Mom's are better, but his don't pull as much. Naomi swallowed the lump in her throat. You're doing fine, Jack grinned. High praise coming from the master. Later that afternoon, Naomi lingered by the doorway as Jack showed Ruthie how to hammer a loose nail back into a chair leg. His movements were patient. Careful, he guided her hands rather than doing it for her. And when the chair finally stood sturdy, he clapped his hands like it was a masterpiece. I didn't know a janitor could fix furniture, Naomi teased from the doorway. Jack shrugged. I've got more tools than degrees, but they get the job done. She laughed softly. It surprised them both. Jack turned to face her, his smile fading just slightly, replaced by something more thoughtful. You laugh like it's not allowed. Naomi looked away. It hasn't been natural for a long time. You don't have to wait for permission here, he said. Not to laugh, not to rest, not to be more than what the world saw you as in uniform. She wanted to tell him how much that meant, but the words got stuck somewhere between her chest and her throat. So she just nodded and walked away. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Naomi stayed up alone in the kitchen. She stood at the sink, staring out at the darkness beyond the frosted window, her arms folded over her chest. She thought about the first time she wore those boots, how proud she'd been, how powerful. They had walked through sand, snow, mud, and blood. They had stepped over debris into bases over borders. They had marched in ceremonies and knelt beside the fallen. They had never failed her. But lately, they had only reminded her of how much she'd lost. She looked down at them again, sitting by the door. And then she did something she hadn't done in years. She whispered, "Thank you. You got me here. But I don't think I need you to carry me anymore." The next morning, the house buzzed with the kind of chaos only a full kitchen can bring: toast, popping syrup, spilling girls laughing over cereal. Jack stood by the stove, flipping pancakes like a short-order cook. Naomi leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, watching the scene with quiet amusement. "You sure you weren't a diner chef in a past life?" she asked. Jack smirked. "I make 3 things. Well, pancakes, scrambled eggs, and firewood stacks. Everything else is a gamble." Ava walked in holding a drawing. "Mom, can we put this on the fridge? Naomi took it a stick-figure version of all 8 of them, including Jack and Maya, standing in front of a big house with hearts for windows. Her throat tightened. "Sure," she said softly. "That's beautiful." Ava beamed. Jack came over and helped her tape it up. Then he looked at Naomi and said in that gentle way of his, "You know, I always thought this house was too big for just me and Maya. But now I think maybe it was just waiting for the right people to fill it." Naomi opened her mouth, then closed it. Her instinct was to deflect, to retreat, to argue. But the truth was she was tired of all that. So instead she replied, "Well, we're not exactly quiet tenants." He smiled. "No, but it's the best kind of noise I've heard in years." That evening, Jack sat on the porch with Maya, watching the twilight roll in. Naomi stepped outside, quietly standing behind them. The girls were inside playing some game with flashlights and giggles. "You always sit out here?" she asked. "Every night," Jack replied. "My wife used to say sunsets are free therapy." Naomi leaned on the railing. She sounds like someone who understood people. She understood pain and joy, and how often they live in the same room. Naomi was silent for a while. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to call this, whatever this is, but it feels dangerous. Like if I let myself believe it's real, it'll disappear." Jack turned toward her. "It won't." "You don't know that." He looked back at the horizon. "No, but I know this pain teaches us to be ready for the fall. But sometimes, it's okay to learn how to stand still again." Naomi looked at him for a long time. Then she glanced down at the doorway where her boot still sat, still, waiting. And for once, she didn't feel the need to put them back on. The knock came just after noon. 2 sharp raps, polite, but purposeful. Naomi froze mid-stir at the stove, the scent of tomato soup and grilled cheese filling the kitchen. Her eyes darted to the front window, but the curtains were drawn. Jack was in the backyard chopping wood. The girls were sprawled across the living room floor, building a pillow fort with Maya. Another knock, this time softer, but more insistent. Naomi wiped her hands, stepped quietly to the door, and opened it just enough to peek out. A woman in a gray windbreaker stood on the porch, clipboard in hand. Mid-40s, neat bun, sharp eyes. Behind her, a sedan idled at the curb. "Good afternoon," the woman said with a clipped smile. "Are you Naomi Carter?" Naomi's body tensed. She stepped outside and pulled the door gently shut behind her. "Yes. May I ask who you are?" The woman flipped open her badge. "Emily Roberts, Department of Child and Family Services. We received a routine update regarding your file and wanted to check in on your current living arrangement." Naomi's stomach dropped. The clipboard, the badge, the tone. It was all too familiar. "I wasn't notified anyone would be coming." "It's a courtesy visit," Roberts said smoothly. "We've been unable to reach your previous listed address or your social worker. You're technically still under review, and we need to ensure the children's well-being." Naomi folded her arms tightly. "My girls are fine. I'm sure they are," Roberts replied. "Would you mind if I step in for just a few minutes?" Naomi hesitated. A dozen instincts warred inside her military maternal survivalist. But before she could answer, the door creaked open behind her. It was Jack. "Everything okay?" he asked, wiping his hands on a towel. Naomi gave him a tight look, but Roberts stepped forward, extending her hand. "Emily Roberts. DCFS. Just a routine check." Jack shook her hand calmly. "You're here about the girls." "Yes. We're verifying Naomi Carter's current living status and custody conditions." Jack nodded slowly. "Well, you can come in on one condition." Roberts blinked. "Which is that you talk to them like they're human beings, not numbers on a form." Naomi shot him a look, but a flicker of gratitude passed behind her eyes. Inside, Roberts took notes. She observed. She asked measured questions. Ava answered with quiet confidence. Belle showed off the drawing still on the fridge. Maya, sensing the tension, kept the younger girls occupied with a card game. Roberts glanced around. This is quite the arrangement. And you, Mr. Harlow? Jack Harlow. This is my home. You live here with Ms. Carter and her children. Jack paused. I live here with my daughter Maya. Naomi and the girls are guests, extended guests. We're figuring things out together. Roberts jotted something down. That arrangement. Is it legal guardianship or? No paperwork, Naomi said quickly. But I am their mother. And she hesitated. He's helping. There was a moment of silence. Roberts folded her clipboard closed. Thank you. I'll be filing an interim report. You may hear from us again soon. She turned to leave, then paused. Naomi, off the record, this place feels stable. That's rare. Just make sure you protect it. These situations can change fast. With that, she was gone. Naomi stood on the porch long after the sedan pulled away. The winter light was fading. Jack stepped beside her, hands tucked into his jacket. You okay? I hate that I still flinch when someone knocks, she said quietly. Like I'm always one clipboard away from losing everything. Jack leaned on the railing. It's not about the clipboard. It's about what it reminds you of. Naomi's eyes narrowed. You always speak in metaphors, Jack smiled faintly. Only when I don't want to say something too directly. She turned to him. Say it. He met her gaze. You're scared that this place is too good to last. That you'll wake up and it'll be gone. That someone will tell you it was never real. Naomi swallowed hard. Because that's happened before. Jack nodded. I know. She blinked. Howie looked out over the backyard where snow still crusted the fence line. When I was still working rescue, we got called to a trailer fire on the outskirts of Columbus. The family got out except for the father. He went back in for his dog. Didn't make it. Naomi said nothing. Jack continued, voice lower. I pulled him out too late. Couldn't save him. His wife was screaming on the lawn barefoot in the snow. The thing is, I knew the guy. He coached Little League with me. I ate at his table. I watched his kids grow up. Naomi watched his jaw tighten, his knuckles whiten on the railing. I stopped firefighting after that. Became a janitor. People thought I quit because of the trauma. But the truth is, he turned to face her. I couldn't save someone I knew. I didn't want to risk knowing anyone else. Naomi's voice came out soft. But you let us in. I didn't plan to, he admitted. But Maya, she's the one who reminded me that walls are meant to hold warmth, not keep people out. Naomi exhaled the breath visible in the cold. I don't know if I'm ready to trust this. You don't have to, Jack said. But the door's open, the lights are on, and dinner's still warm. She looked back toward the house. Through the window, she saw Ava helping Maya fold blankets. June was dancing with Clara in the hallway. Belle was trying to sneak a second cookie. Naomi's voice was almost a whisper. I didn't think I could have this again. Not after what happened. Jack looked at her steady. Maybe it's not about having it again. Maybe it's about building it new, from pieces that survived. That night, Naomi sat at the edge of her bed, her back to the room, her boots in her hands. She stared at them for a long time. Then she did something different. She unlaced them slowly, carefully, almost reverently, and placed them side by side beneath the edge of the bed. Not by the door. Not ready to run. Not anymore. The storm rolled in just after dusk. Thick clouds, heavy and low, pressed against the sky like bruises. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches like they were made of string. Inside the house, the girls squealed, as the lights flickered, once then steadied again. Jack moved through the living room with a flashlight in one hand and a bundle of extra blankets in the other. He was calm, practiced. Ohio storms didn't scare him. They just required preparation. But tonight, something about the wind felt older, like it was carrying more than just cold air. Naomi stood in the hallway, arms crossed over her chest, eyes fixed on the window. She didn't flinch, didn't move. But Jack could tell she wasn't watching the weather. She was bracing for it. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I've slept through artillery strikes quieter than this," she muttered. Jack gave a soft smile. "Then this'll be a breeze." Naomi didn't smile back. He stepped closer. "Hey, it's just a storm. Nothing's coming for you tonight." She looked at him, and for a split second, the tough exterior cracked. "You can't promise that." Jack didn't argue. He just handed her a blanket. "Then let's stay warm anyway." In the den, Maya lit battery-powered lanterns and set them around like tiny glowing stars. The younger girls clustered together under a massive quilt, giggling and whispering about the storm castle they were building. Naomi watched from the doorway as Jack told Belle and Ruthie a story. Something about a dragon who refused to hoard treasure and instead gave it away one gold coin at a time. "Did you make that up?" Naomi asked softly. Jack glanced at her. "Yup." "On the spot." She raised an eyebrow. "That dragon sounds suspiciously like you," he chuckled. "Well, I am grumpy in the mornings and live in a cave full of hand tools." Belle grinned. "And you give away pancakes." Naomi smirked, but the moment passed quickly. Her eyes drifted to Ava, the eldest, who was curled up in the corner, silent arms wrapped around her knees. She crossed the room and sat beside her. "You all right, sweet girl?" Ava didn't answer. Naomi tried again. "You scared?" A pause. Then Ava whispered, "I remember this sound. From the night Dad died." Naomi's breath caught. She reached out, placed a gentle hand on her daughter's back. "It's okay. I'm here now." Ava's voice was barely audible. "But what if you go again?" Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. "I won't. I promise." "But you didn't get to say goodbye last time," Ava said. "We didn't even know if you knew." Naomi swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She wanted to say something, anything, but her voice failed her. Then a soft voice came from across the room. "I didn't get to say goodbye either," Maya said. She was sitting on the floor, now arms wrapped around her knees, eyes distant. "When my mom died, it was fast. Stroke, no warning, no last hug, just gone." The room fell completely silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Maya looked at Ava. "But I talk to her sometimes, when I'm scared, or when something good happens. I tell her anyway." Naomi felt the breath catch in her chest. "I think she hears me," Maya added. "Not like words, but I think she knows I'm okay." Ava blinked. Then slowly she nodded, and without a word, she leaned over and rested her head on Maya's shoulder. Naomi felt tears rise, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she leaned back and let the silence wrap around them. Later that night, after the storm passed and the girls drifted into sleep, Naomi found Jack in the kitchen, sitting alone at the table with a cup of tea in his hands. "You stayed up," she said. "So did you." She hesitated, then sat across from him. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just full, like it had weight, but not burden. "She's afraid I'll leave," Naomi said finally. Jack looked up. "Ava." She nodded. She remembers more than the others, remembers the nights I wasn't there. The silence. Jack stirred his tea. "Maya used to cry in her sleep for months after Natalie passed. Wouldn't let me hold her. Wouldn't let anyone hold her. She'd just wake up, get dressed, eat breakfast. Like a robot. I thought she was strong. I didn't realize. She was broken. Naomi leaned forward. "So what did you do? I kept showing up," he said simply. "Every day. Same time. Same way." Until one morning she crawled into my bed and said, "Daddy, I had a dream that didn't hurt." Naomi looked down at the table. Jack's voice softened. "You don't have to fix it all, Naomi. You just have to stay. That's what they need. Not a plan. Not perfection. Just you." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I never learned how to stay. I only ever learned how to go." "You've stayed longer here than anywhere in years," he said. "That counts." Naomi blinked back tears. "It scares me, how safe it feels." Jack smiled. "Good. The best kind of love is always a little terrifying." Before heading to bed, Naomi walked through the darkened house one last time. She checked on the girls, pulled up blankets, kissed foreheads. In the den, she paused beside the blanket fort, where Ava and Maya slept side by side. She whispered, "Thank you," and turned away. Then, without thinking, she walked to the front door. The boots were still there, lined up neatly. But this time, she didn't reach for them. Instead, she walked past them barefoot and climbed the stairs toward the only place that felt like peace. She didn't have all the answers, but tonight, she stayed. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing a person can do. It arrived on a Thursday, an unassuming white envelope with a government seal and a computer-generated label that made Naomi's stomach knot before she even opened it. She stood by the mailbox, the wind tugging at the hem of her borrowed cardigan, and stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Her name was printed in bold. Below it, the return address, Department of Child and Family Services. Naomi didn't need to open it to know what it was, but she did anyway. Inside, the language was sterile, cold, efficient like always. A routine notification of status. A reminder that the case was still under review. A caution about unauthorized housing. A warning that placement might be reevaluated pending living conditions. She read it twice, then once more, and then she folded it. Neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and pressed it tight against her chest. Jack found her 20 minutes later, sitting on the back porch steps unmoving. The girls were inside playing a board game. Maya was helping June with her reading. It should have been a peaceful afternoon. But Naomi's face was pale. Still. He sat beside her in silence. After a minute, she handed him the envelope. He opened it slowly, scanning the words. Then he lowered it to his lap and looked at her. "It's not a removal notice." "No," she said flatly. "But it's a warning." Naomi nodded. "They're saying this setup might not be permanent. They're saying if I don't prove I can provide a stable, independent home, they'll consider relocation." She swallowed hard. "They'll take my girls." Jack stared at the trees for a long moment, jaw tight. Then he asked quietly, "What do you want to do?" Naomi didn't answer. "Not right away." "I want to run," she admitted finally. "Pack them up. Find a cheap motel. Disappear. It's what I've always done." Jack didn't react. He just waited. "But," she continued, voice trembling, "they're different now. I'm different. Belle sings in the shower. Ava writes poems. June lets people hold her hand. We're not who we were 3 months ago." Jack turned to her. "You don't have to run, Naomi. You don't understand." "No," he interrupted gently. "I do. Every instinct is telling you to get out before you lose them. But listen to me. Leaving won't protect them. It'll prove the state right." Naomi covered her face with both hands. "What if I'm not enough?" "You're not alone," Jack said. "That's the difference." She lowered her hands. Her eyes met his, raw and scared. "Then help me. Please. Help me fight." Jack nodded once, every step. The next morning, Jack was waiting at the kitchen table with coffee and a notepad. Naomi sat down slowly, eyebrows raised. "We're making a case," he said. "Like a real one. Legal, organized, undeniable." Naomi blinked. "I thought you were a janitor." "I am," he said, smiling. "But I used to date a paralegal. I learned how to use highlighters and tabs." She chuckled barely, but it was there. Jack pulled out the yellow pad and read off Item 1, secure a letter of recommendation from the school. "Belle and Clara are enrolled now, right?" Naomi nodded, leaning in. Item 2, he continued documentation from the clinic about their checkups last week. Proof of consistent medical care. Naomi added, "I can get a statement from the social worker at the shelter we were in before here." "Perfect," Jack said. Item 3, affidavits from character witnesses. Naomi snorted. "Like who? I haven't talked to anyone but you." "Then start with me." She looked up, surprised. "I'll testify," Jack said plainly. "I'll write, I'll speak. I'll stand in front of anyone and say exactly what I've seen. A mother who wakes up early, who checks homework, who teaches her kids to apologize, and makes them believe they matter." Naomi opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, tears slid silently down her cheeks. Jack didn't rush her. After a moment, she wiped her eyes and said, "We'll need photos, evidence of daily life." "I've got a camera," he said. "Legal counsel. I know a guy. You know a guy." Jack grinned. "He's 73 and half deaf, but he owes me from when I fixed his well pump last year." Naomi laughed, really laughed. "We're building a defense team out of retirees and handymen. Better than nothing," Jack said. "And this house, it's proof, too. They'll see it's not perfect, but it's full. It's safe." Naomi looked around. At the clean floors, the drawings on the fridge, the distant laughter from the den. "It's more than safe," she whispered. "It's the only place we've been able to exhale." That afternoon, Naomi gathered the girls. She knelt in front of them, hands on her knees, eyes serious but warm. "We're going to have some visitors soon," she said. "People who'll ask questions. About us. About how we live." "Are we in trouble?" Belle asked, brow furrowed. "No, sweetheart. But we need to show them that this is our home, that we want to stay. Can you help me with that?" 6 small heads nodded. "And if they ask what you like most here," Naomi added. Voice shaking, "Tell them the truth. Whatever that is." Clara raised her hand shyly. "Can we say the pancakes?" Naomi smiled. "Absolutely." That night after the girls went to bed, Naomi stood at the doorway again, staring at her boots. They were still there, untouched, patient. She bent down, fingers grazing the laces. But instead of putting them on, she pulled a sheet of paper from the side table drawer. And she wrote. She wrote to the Department of Child and Family Services. But more than that, she wrote to the version of herself that had once believed she had to choose between being a soldier and being a mother. She wrote with clarity, with pride, and for the first time in years, without fear. She signed it, folded it, and slipped it into an envelope. Then she placed the envelope beside her boots and left them both by the door. In the morning, she would send it. And she would stay. The morning of the hearing was colder than expected. Gray skies, frost on the windows, and silence that clung to the walls like damp air. Jack brewed coffee while Naomi stood at the kitchen sink, staring out into the stillness. She'd barely touched her toast. The girls were dressed and packed into the car, giggling nervously with Maya, not quite understanding the weight of what the day meant. But Naomi understood. Today wasn't a court date. It was a line in the sand, between losing them and keeping them, between surviving and finally living. "You okay?" Jack asked, gently pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the faded yellow sunflower. Naomi didn't turn. "I keep hearing the judge's voice in my head before we've even walked in. cold, detached, like she's already decided. Jack leaned against the counter beside her. You've walked into rooms harder than this, not with 6 hearts on the line. He was quiet for a moment. Then what if I told you? They won't be the only hearts in that room. Naomi looked at him. Jack's voice lowered. Because mine will be there too. And I'd bet my life it's beating for the same reason as yours. She blinked hard. Jack. He didn't let her finish. He just reached out and gently took her hand. Let's go fight for what we already know is ours. The courthouse sat like a forgotten relic in the center of the county, a red brick building with brass plaques, old wood paneling and hallways that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and bureaucracy. Naomi's stomach twisted as they passed security. Every step echoed louder than the last. Jack walked beside her, with calm purpose, carrying the file folder thick with evidence, letters, photos, and statements. The girls waited in a small side room with Maya and a kindly volunteer who offered juice boxes. Ava gave Naomi a quick, fierce hug and whispered, "We'll be okay, Mama." Naomi swallowed her fear and nodded. She hoped the lie in her smile looked like truth. The hearing room was smaller than Naomi expected, almost intimate. A round table, a judge in dark robes, a clerk, a court liaison. No jury. No audience. Just the people whose words would define her future. Case 3247C, the clerk announced. Naomi Carter, re minor dependents. Ava Ruthie, Belle, Clara Grace, and June Carter. Informal custody review under Section 6 emergency placement. The judge looked over her glasses. Ms. Carter, do you understand why you've been called today? Naomi stood. Yes, Your Honor. You are currently residing in a home not legally designated as your primary residence. You have not yet obtained permanent employment, and your previous record remains unresolved. Is that correct? Yes, Naomi said again, steadier. Jack stood beside her and placed the folder gently on the table. Permission to speak on her behalf, he asked. The judge blinked. And you are Jack Harlow, legal guardian of Maya Harlow, owner of the residence in question, and the man who's witnessed every single day for the last 3 months exactly the kind of mother this woman is. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Jack opened the folder, hands steady. She wakes up before dawn, packs 6 lunches, checks homework, braids hair. She reads bedtime stories, mediates toy disputes like a diplomat, and when she's not caring for them, she's helping elderly veterans at a community kitchen with my daughter. He looked directly at the judge. She doesn't have a paycheck yet, but she has purpose. She doesn't have her name on a lease, but she has made a home. And I'm here to say formally that home includes me. Naomi's breath caught. The judge looked surprised. Are you offering shared guardianship, Mr. Harlow? I am, Jack said. Not because she needs rescuing, but because families are built when someone says, I'm with you no matter what. There was silence. Then the judge leaned back. Do you have any supporting evidence? Naomi stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. We've submitted letters from teachers, clinic records, statements from our neighbors, a notarized letter from my former commanding officer, and a handwritten letter from my daughter, Maya. She glanced at Jack. She asked to write it herself. The judge skimmed through the file. I see it. She unfolded the page. My name is Maya Harlow. I'm 10. I live with my dad, and now with 6 new sisters. They are loud, sometimes messy, and they steal my socks. But I like it. Naomi is not my mom, but she tucks me in. She taught me how to make eggs. She doesn't yell even when someone breaks something. She listens. I think families aren't just who you're born to. They're who show up. Naomi showed up. She stayed. Please let her keep staying. By the end, the clerk had stopped typing. The judge took a deep breath, folded the paper, and set it aside. I have no authority to grant permanent custody, she said at last. But I do have discretion regarding placement during ongoing review. She looked at Naomi. This isn't a perfect household. But then, again, perfection is rarely real. She picked up her pen and signed the form. Placement remains unchanged. Children will remain with their mother under continued supervision. Shared guardianship with Mr. Harlow. Next formal review in 6 months. Naomi's knees nearly buckled. Jack caught her elbow. "Thank you," she whispered. The judge gave a rare smile. "You may go." They stepped into the hallway, lightheaded and breathless. Naomi pressed her hand to her chest, as if to keep her heart from leaping out. Jack leaned close and murmured, "Still think we built our legal team out of scraps?" Naomi laughed through the tears. Scraps and miracles. She turned to him. "Jack, I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "Don't." "But I don't," he repeated gently. "Just stay." She looked at him, eyes full, voice quiet. I wasn't sure I could belong anywhere again. He touched her shoulder, then brushed her hand with his fingertips, small, steady enough. "You don't have to belong," he whispered. "You already do." And for the first time in years, Naomi believed it. The house had never been louder. The front door swung open, and 6 girls stormed inside like a tiny parade, laughing, chattering, dropping backpacks and boots and mittens like breadcrumbs. Naomi followed close behind her, arms full of grocery bags, and heart full of something she hadn't dared to name for a long time. Relief. It had been 4 days since the hearing. 4 days since the judge signed the paper that gave her more than legal standing. She gave Naomi a place to breathe again. But even still, Naomi woke every morning expecting the rug to be pulled out from under her. That dread was hard to unlearn. It lived in her bones. Mom Ava called from the kitchen. "We're out of peanut butter. It's in the second bag," Naomi called back. "Bottom left." Ava fished through the bag and pulled it out with a triumphant grin. "You're getting scary good at groceries." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Scary," Ava shrugged. "Mom-level scary. Like you know what I'm going to ask before I ask it." Naomi laughed freely without checking herself. In the living room, Maya helped the younger girls hang up coats and line up shoes by the door. They'd made it a habit now, something Jack had gently introduced one snowy evening by turning it into a game. Now it was second nature. Little rituals that slowly knit the threads of something real. Jack entered last, closing the door behind him with one hand and balancing a sack of firewood in the other. "You realize," he said, "we're going through more peanut butter than a summer camp." "We're feeding 7 growing girls," Naomi replied, taking a piece of kindling from him. "You want to ration snacks? You go tell Belle." Jack shuddered. "I'm not crossing that line." They both laughed. It was a shared rhythm now, teasing, tasking, talking without weight. As they moved around the kitchen together, Naomi reached into the cabinet for plates. Their hands brushed. Jack paused. She looked up. For a second, the world stood still. Naomi held his gaze. "What are we, Jack?" The question hung there, suspended between them, fragile but honest. Jack leaned in slightly. "We're something I don't want to lose. That's what I know." She nodded. "Me too." Then softly, "But I'm scared that this thing between us, it's growing out of gratitude or survival." Jack's eyes were kind. "You think I chop wood and make pancakes for every woman I shelter from a snowstorm?" Naomi smiled despite herself. "No. But you let me in before you had a reason to." "I had a reason," Jack said. "I just didn't recognize it yet." Later that evening, Naomi sat at the table sorting through a pile of school permission slips and immunization records, while the girls practiced a skit in the den. From the sounds of it, the plot involved a magical unicorn, 2 grumpy frogs, and someone named Captain Mustache. Jack emerged from the basement with a dusty storage box and dropped it on the table. "What's that?" Naomi asked. "Something Maya and I packed away 2 years ago," Jack said, opening it. Inside were stacks of old letters, hand-drawn cards, photos, and a small video camera. "Thought maybe we could record something," he said. "In case. You ever want to show the girls where they came from, where they found their new beginning?" Naomi swallowed. "I don't think I could make it through something like that without crying." Jack chuckled. "That's what makes it worth recording." Just then, Ava peeked in from the den. "Mom, there's someone at the door." Naomi stood surprised. At this hour, she opened it to find a woman in a navy sweater and horn-rimmed glasses, standing on the porch holding a clipboard. "Good evening," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Catherine Walsh, court-appointed liaison for the DCFS Review Board. I was hoping to speak with Miss Carter and Mr. Harlow for a few minutes, if now's a good time." Jack stepped forward. "Sure, come on in." The woman entered, taking in the sight of the house coats, on hooks drawings on the wall, soup simmering on the stove. Her gaze lingered on the girls in the den, who had now quieted, sensing the formal tone. "I've read your file," Walsh said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "But I find paperwork rarely tells the whole story." Naomi sat slowly, suddenly cold. "What would you like to know? I'd actually like to speak with one of the children," she said gently. "If that's all right." Naomi's pulse quickened. "Of course." Before she could call for Ava, Maya stepped into the room. "I can talk," she said quietly. Walsh smiled. "Are you sure?" Maya nodded. "I'd like to." Jack glanced at Naomi, but she simply nodded, small, proud, and trembling. Maya sat across from Walsh, small hands folded in her lap. Walsh spoke softly. "Maya, can you tell me a little about what it's been like living with Naomi and her girls?" Maya nodded. "It's loud. Messy. Sometimes we fight over who gets the blue spoon. But it's good. It feels alive, like a real home." Walsh's pen moved slowly. "Do you feel safe here?" "Yes." "Do you like having them here?" Maya tilted her head as if confused by the question. "They're not just here. They belong here." Walsh smiled. "Thank you, Maya." Maya stood, then paused. "Can I say one more thing?" Walsh nodded. Maya took a deep breath. "Before they came, my house was quiet. Too quiet. My dad was kind, but sad. I was trying to be happy enough for both of us, but that's a lot of work for one girl." She glanced at Naomi. "Then they showed up. And I got sisters. And another mom, not the same as before, but just as real." And my dad smiled again. Not just sometimes. A lot. She looked back at Walsh, voice steady. "So if anyone asks, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us." There was a silence so deep it felt sacred. Walsh wrote nothing more. She simply stood, shook hands, and said, "I'll be filing a positive recommendation. You'll hear from us again soon. But off the record, I wish every home I visited looked like this." She left quietly. Naomi turned to Maya, voice barely a whisper. "That was beautiful." Maya smiled and shrugged. "I meant it." Jack pulled her into a hug. Naomi joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them, finally allowing herself to hold, not brace. No speeches, no declarations, just warmth, and the certainty that when one brave voice speaks with truth, it can echo louder than any gavel ever could. The formal letter arrived 2 weeks later. Naomi held it in her hands, heart pounding as she stood in the center of the kitchen, surrounded by morning light and the low hum of the dishwasher. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she ran her fingers along the crease, feeling the weight of what it could mean. Jack stepped in behind her, still drying his hands with a towel. "Is that it?" Naomi nodded. "I think so." "You want me to read it?" She shook her head, opened it slowly, and scanned the first few lines. Her breath hitched. Approved for continued placement. Family reunification supported. Joint guardianship recommended for 6-month review. Her shoulders sagged in relief. They're letting us stay. Jack let out a slow breath. Of course they are. Naomi turned to him, the paper trembling in her fingers. I kept thinking they'd find a reason, some tiny line in some rule book that would take it all away. He smiled gently. But they didn't. Because there's nothing to take away. This isn't a loophole, Naomi. It's a life. She folded the letter, placed it on the table, and for a long moment just stood there with her eyes closed. The air in the house felt different, lighter, like the last door had finally been locked behind them. Not as a prison, but as a home. Later that afternoon, Naomi stepped out onto the porch with a basket of folded clothes balanced on her hip. She paused, watching the girls chase each other through the front yard. Belle was shouting commands like a general. June kept tripping and laughing. Ava leaned against the porch railing, sketching in a notebook. Jack was down by the woodpile, splitting logs with the rhythmic confidence of someone who found peace in repetition. Naomi made her way down the steps and crossed to him. You're going to run out of things to chop. Not likely, Jack said, wiping sweat from his brow. This town burns through firewood faster than secrets, she laughed. Well, that's saying something. He looked up, studied her for a long beat. You're standing differently. Naomi blinked. What's your shoulders? You're not waiting for the roof to cave in. She smiled, slow and warm. Maybe I'm finally starting to believe the roof is mine. Jack set down the axe. There's something I've been meaning to ask. Naomi raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. He chuckled. It's not. But it is official. He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and handed it to her. Naomi unfolded it slowly. At the top, petition for shared guardianship, voluntary declaration. Her breath caught. You don't have to, Jack said quickly. This isn't pressure. It's just, if anything ever happened to me, I'd want someone like you to be there for Maya. And I want to be there for your girls. Not just practically. Fully. Naomi stared at the form, then back at him. You really want this? I already have it, Jack said. The paperwork just catches up. She smiled, tears rising. Then let's sign it. The next morning they sat at the courthouse again, but this time there was no tension. No fear. Just quiet satisfaction. The clerk, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, notarized their signatures and handed over the duplicate copies. Congratulations, he said. You've just officially become whatever this is. Jack chuckled. We like to call it family, even if it doesn't fit in the usual boxes. The man nodded. Best kind usually doesn't. That weekend the house buzzed with preparation. Maya and Ava decorated the living room with string lights. Ruthie and Clara made invitations out of colored paper and glitter glue. Naomi baked 3 kinds of cookies, while Belle insisted on sampling for safety. They weren't throwing a party exactly. It was more like a gathering, a small, informal celebration of permanence. Jack grilled out back. Naomi arranged photographs on the wall pictures of each child of Jack and Maya of the snowy night when it all began. One photo showed all 8 of them huddled on the couch in pajamas, messy hair, and wide grins, a snapshot of chaos and belonging. Just before sunset, neighbors arrived. Mrs. Renshaw from down the street, the retired firefighter Jack, used to work with the librarian, who helped Maya pick out books every week. Even Emily Roberts from DCFS showed up with a tin of muffins and a smile that almost reached her eyes this time. As the night deepened, lanterns glowed across the porch. The fire pit crackled. Children played tag under the stars. And for once, Naomi didn't feel like she was borrowing joy. She owned it. She earned it. She was living it. Near the end of the evening, Naomi stood at the edge of the porch, looking out over the yard. Jack stepped beside her, 2 mugs of cider in hand. "Pretty good turnout," he said. "They didn't come for me," Naomi replied softly. Jack nudged her. "They came for the woman who rebuilt a life out of scraps, for the mother who stayed when it was easier to run, and for the heart that turned a stranger's house into a home." Naomi looked at him. "Do you really believe all that I do?" he said simply. "And so does everyone here, including 6 small humans currently chasing your youngest through a garden hose." She laughed, and it spilled out of her like music. Then her voice dropped quiet and sure. "Jack, I think I'm ready." "For what?" "For more." He smiled. "More what?" She turned to him fully, now heart wide open. "More of this. More mornings. More burnt pancakes. More porch swings. More us." He didn't say anything. He just set down the mugs, took her hand, and kissed her soft and slow, like a promise finally spoken aloud. That night, Naomi stood once more at the front door. The boots were still there, old, and worn, the leather scuffed from years of duty. But beside them now was a new pair, small, bright pink, belonging to June. Another blue with stars belonged to Maya. A third, muddy and broken in Jack's. Naomi smiled and whispered, "We made it." Then, with quiet reverence, she slid her old boots aside to make more room, because this doorway didn't mark the threshold of departure anymore. It marked the beginning of everything that mattered. The morning air carried the crisp scent of October leaves, like fire scattered across the ground, and the distant hum of school buses weaving through quiet streets. But today wasn't a school day. Today was Veterans Day. Naomi stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, slowly fastening the last button of her pressed uniform shirt. She hadn't worn the full set in over a year, not since she returned from her final deployment. The fabric still bore the faint creases of storage, but she'd spent the night before smoothing out every wrinkle, shining the brass, polishing the boots. Not the old ones, a new pair, clean, whole, purposeful. The old boots stayed under the bench by the door, retired, respected, but no longer needed. She stared at her reflection. The uniform still fit, but it looked different on her now. Less armor. More acknowledgement. Not a shield to hide behind. A part of her, but not the whole. Behind her, she heard a gasp. "Whoa," Belle whispered, standing in the hallway with Maya and Ruthie. "You look like a superhero." Naomi turned, lips curling. "Superheroes wear capes." "Yeah," Maya said. "But the real ones wear boots." They arrived early to the town square, which had been transformed into a sea of folding chairs, flag garlands, and a makeshift stage set up in front of the war memorial. Jack found a parking spot along the curb and helped the girls pile out, each one clutching a small flag or wearing a red poppy on their jackets. Naomi walked toward the gathering area, head-high boots echoing softly on the pavement. People turned, some recognizing her from past years, in uniform, others seeing her for the first time. But it wasn't the uniform that drew their attention. It was the 6 little girls following closely behind her. Each wore matching navy cardigans, white tights, and small brown boots that clicked in rhythm. They marched in 2 straight lines, chattering and giggling, but trying their best to stay in formation, as Naomi had taught them that morning. "Left right." June whispered under her breath, tongue peeking through her teeth in concentration. The sight made more than one elderly veteran in the crowd wipe at their eyes. Jack leaned over to one of the organizers near the podium. "They're up next, right after the mayor." The man nodded. "Your girl's speech was approved last week. She wrote it herself," Jack beamed. "All on her own." Naomi turned when she heard that, surprised. "Speech," Jack raised an eyebrow. "You didn't know?" Naomi glanced around. "Who's giving a speech?" Then she saw Ava, standing off to the side with a folded sheet of paper in her hands and a look of absolute resolve on her face. When the mayor finished his remarks, The MC stepped to the microphone. And now we have a few words from someone who represents the voice of a new generation of gratitude. Please welcome Miss Ava Carter. The crowd applauded politely as Ava approached the podium. Naomi's heart pounded. She hadn't known this was coming. Ava had kept it quiet. But now, standing alone before 100 strangers, Ava unfolded the paper and cleared her throat. My name is Ava Carter. I'm 12 years old. My mom is a soldier. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. She didn't come home the way other moms do. She came back with tired eyes and hands that shook sometimes. She came back quieter, heavier. But she came back. Naomi's throat tightened. She brought us here after we lost everything. And for a while I thought we were still lost. I thought maybe we'd always be drifting from couch to motel to bench, until we met Mr. Jack and Maya. She smiled. Jack shifted beside Naomi, blinking rapidly. In their house, we didn't just find shelter. We found soup on the stove, stories at bedtime, a back porch for watching fireflies, and someone who looked at my mom like she wasn't broken. Naomi blinked hard, her lips parted. I know Veterans Day is about honoring those who served, Ava continued, her voice clear. So today I want to honor my mom not just for the uniform she wore overseas, but for the courage it took to keep loving us when she was running on empty, and for staying, even when she didn't know how. A pause. And I want to honor Mr. Jack for showing us that kindness doesn't have to be loud to be strong, for giving us more than a roof. He gave us a table, a family. A hush blanketed the crowd. Then Ava stepped back from the mic, folded her paper, and walked down the steps. The applause didn't erupt. It rose slowly like dawn. Warm. Lasting. Real. After the ceremony, people approached Naomi, shaking hands, thanking her, complimenting the girls. Some were parents. Others were veterans. One elderly man in a wheelchair simply saluted her with tearful eyes. But the only words that stuck came from a quiet voice as they reached the car. Did I say too much? Ava asked nervously. Naomi knelt down and cupped her daughter's face. No, sweet girl. You said everything. That night, as the sky turned indigo and the house settled into its evening rhythm, Naomi stepped outside with Jack. They sat side by side on the porch swing, listening to the laughter drifting from inside. She blindsided me, Naomi said, shaking her head with a smile. I know, Jack replied, but she said exactly what needed to be said. Naomi looked at him. You think so, I do. And she's right. You didn't come home the same, but you came home better. Naomi was quiet a long moment. Then I keep waiting for someone to tell me I don't deserve this. Jack turned to her. Then let me be the one to tell you. You do. Every moment. Every breath of it. She rested her head on his shoulder. You think we'll be okay? We already are. Inside the house, 6 pairs of little boots lined the wall, scuffed and dusty from marching in grass and gravel. And beside them, Naomi's new boots stood tall, worn in just enough to prove she'd walked some hard roads. But not alone. Not anymore. The first snow of winter arrived quietly, the way life's biggest moments often do, without thunder, without warning. Just a fine dusting of white that kissed the trees, softened the rooftops, and turned the fields behind the farmhouse into a page waiting to be written. Inside the kitchen, the windows fogged with warmth as Naomi stirred a pot of soup, humming under her breath. Belle and June chased each other in socked feet across the floor. Maya helped Clara set the table, while Jack carried in firewood, brushing flakes from his coat. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a birthday. It was just a Tuesday. But in Naomi's heart, it felt like something more, a kind of anniversary one, not marked by a date on the calendar, but by the absence of fear. by the gentle everyday miracle of not wondering if it would all disappear. She looked up as Jack entered, cheeks flushed from the cold. "You're late." "Snow slowed me down," he said, shaking his coat loose. "Also, Ruthie insisted on sending me with a list of exactly 17 marshmallows for the hot cocoa." Naomi grinned. "She's learning standards." He smiled at her in that way he did, soft, amused, and always a little in awe. Later that evening, after dinner and board games and giggles that stretched far past bedtime, the house settled into a quiet hum. Naomi stood in the living room, picking up stray socks and refolding a blanket that had been turned into a dragon cave just hours earlier. Jack stepped beside her, holding 2 mugs of peppermint tea. "Want to sit for a bit?" "Do I have a choice?" He raised an eyebrow. "You always have a choice. That's what makes it real." She took the mug, letting her fingers warm around it. "Do you ever wonder how this became our life all the time?" Jack said. "Especially when I find glitter in my coffee." Naomi chuckled, then turned serious. "But really, I used to think I didn't deserve this, that I'd missed my chance." "You didn't miss anything," he replied. "You just hadn't reached the place where you were meant to stop." She tilted her head. "Stop," Jack gestured toward the front door. "Your boots. I see them every day by the bench. They haven't moved in weeks." Naomi smiled slowly. "They used to be the first thing I touched every morning. My signal to be ready. To run. To defend. To leave if I had to." Jack's voice was gentle. And now, she looked toward the doorway where her boots sat alongside the small, muddy ones of her girls and Maya's favorite purple sneakers. "Now they're just boots," she whispered. "Not a shield. Not a ticket out. Just something that got me here." The following morning, Naomi woke early. Before the sun, before the noise. The house was still. She pulled on a sweater and stepped out onto the porch, the boards creaking softly beneath her feet. Snow blanketed everything. The fields shimmered silver. Smoke curled from the chimney, and on the porch swing sat Ava, wrapped in a blanket notebook on her lap. "You're up early," Naomi said, sitting beside her. "I like the quiet," Ava replied. "It feels honest." Naomi glanced at the page in her lap. "More poems," Ava nodded. "This one's about beginnings." Naomi smiled. "You've had your share." Ava looked up, eyes wise beyond her years. "I used to think you were sad all the time. But now I think maybe you were just tired of pretending to be strong." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "Where'd you learn that?" Ava said, simply. They sat there for a while, mother and daughter soldier, and survivor, just 2 women watching the world turn white. Then Ava said, "I'm glad your boots stayed." Naomi reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "So am I." That afternoon, they built snowmen in the yard. Maya insisted hers needed glasses. Ruthie tried to give hers a crown made of pine cones. Jack carved a sled path down the hill behind the barn, laughing like a man half his age, as the girls raced down, screaming with joy. Naomi stood at the top of the hill, arms crossed, boots, firm in the snow, watching the people she loved carve joy into the world. Jack trudged up beside her, slightly out of breath. "Still think you're not ready for more?" She shook her head, smiling. "I'm not ready. I'm already in it." He looked at her for a long moment. "So, what now?" Naomi turned to him, eyes clear. "Now we keep going. No marching, no running, just walking. Together." Jack reached for her hand. I liked the sound of that. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Naomi sat on the floor near the front door. She reached beneath the bench and pulled out the old boots. Scuffed. Weathered. Carriers of 1,000 silent stories. She held them for a long time. Then stood. Jack watched from the stairs as she stepped outside, boots in hand, and disappeared behind the house. When she returned, her hands were empty. "You buried them?" he asked gently. Naomi nodded. "Near the big oak tree, the one with the wide roots. I thought it was a good place to lay them down." Jack walked over, wrapped his arms around her. "They carried you far," he whispered. "But they don't need to carry me anymore," she said, resting her head against his chest. "I'm already home." And in the quiet stillness of a house, once meant for two, now bursting with life, laughter, and love, a woman who once only knew how to leave, finally chose to stay. Forever. And just like that, a single act of kindness became the beginning of something lasting. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale, but a family built from courage, trust, and the quiet choice to stay. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from today? Leave a comment below and be part of this growing circle of kindness. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, full of heart, hope, and healing, feel free to subscribe. We'll be right here, sharing one story at a time. Thank you truly for spending part of your day with us. It means more than you know.